Welcome to Eternal Journey, the podcast.
What is up, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Eternal Journey, the podcast that talks about all things eternal with a focus on limited play. I'm your host, Jedi, and this week on episode 45 of the podcast, we're going to do a slight audible. We were going to do the redraw episode, but with the ECQ in the books now, we are bringing on a special guest along with one of my co-hosts, and we're going to talk about the control flavored of Midrange. So, long story short, in the limited resources did a really good job of saying that most, like 95% of decks in limited or draft are all forms of mid-range because we aren't able to perfectly build our decks based on the packs we get. So it's just on whether you have an aggressive, a mid-rangey, or a control flavor of deck. And today we're going to bring on a specialist that really, both in constructed and limited, favors the control aspect of it, in the form of a good friend of mine, longtime viewer, Death3366. What is up, buddy? How are you doing today?
Greetings. I'm quite fine, and it's always interesting to me that you refer to me as Death3366, while in the game, that's my Twitch name and on Warcry, while in game I'm just Death.
Oh, all right. Well, there you go. Death has arrived.
Perfect.
And now, of course, the other voice you hear, one of the co-hosts on the show, Mr. Top 64 of the ECQ himself, JohnHolio. What is up, John? How you doing this week?
Man, I am fantastic. You know, it was my first top 64 in one of these ECQs, my first Throne one, and I just feel so good right now.
Yeah, it's well deserved, especially since you went there with your own brew that we'll talk about later on this show. So real quick, just an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. It's a big show today. We have a lot to talk about. So of course we're going to do our pack one, pick one. Then we're going to have our main topic, which is talking about building a control deck in draft and limited. And then we're going to have a slightly bigger than usual constructed corner, talking about both Death and John's decks in the ECQ, as well as what they want to do with the decks going forward. And then finally, we'll end the show with some spoilers. Not all of them, because I think we're up to 7 spoilers, but we are going to talk about 3 of the ones that we want to talk about today. And that's going to wrap up the show. So a couple of things, a little bit of housekeeping. I want to go ahead and mention the YouTube channel, which finally I was able to change it to Eternal Journey. So there you go. Eternal Journey on YouTube. Boom. Got there.
Wonderful.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you guys so much for the ongoing support and all the subscribers to the channel. That's where you can catch all my stuff. If you aren't able to catch me live, you can go there and catch most of my content, as well as exclusive YouTube content, both limited and constructed stuff, and a couple of outlying special events and things like that at, once again, Eternal Journey on YouTube. That also segues into me going live at twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. We can catch me every Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Sunday mornings, and then Monday, Tuesday evenings, where we do some limited cube drafting. I'm going to start incorporating a deck doctor aspect and maybe some viewer drafts like I recently posted today, which was a lot of fun. Speaking of cube drafts, that is where we draft 5 curated packs of a format of my own design, completely free on Eternal Warcry. You import it to the game client should you have the cards, and we battle out. So a good way to have another draft format. If you are interested to find out what cube is, I do have another podcast. I believe it's episode 41 that we go more in depth about cube drafting, so you can check that out. Okay. Finally, last section of our preemptive stuff is our subscriber shout out. So a couple of shout outs today. First off, let's go ahead and shout out all the people that I know personally that made it to the top 64, which of course we have John, then we have Parmley from the Misplay podcast. So thank you, Parmley and the Misplay podcast. Check them out because now they have some validity to them. And then we have Enrouch1, a fellow YouTuber, or not YouTuber, streamer, Yodabite, Celtic Guardian 7, that's right, one of the limited all-stars from Farming Eternals, boom, showing up in the constructed corner. Magi 210, and then our very own Sunnyvale. You guys rocked it today and yesterday and the whole weekend, so good job. Congratulations, you guys. And then...
yeah, well played, everyone.
Yeah, it was a ton. I wish I got to see more of my friends on camera, but such is life. I was waiting for you to give me the notification that you were on camera, and then I was going to tune in real quick, put you on screen for everybody. All right, and then our newest subscriber to the Jedi Order is Jungle Spider. Jungle Spider actually found me on the podcast and then came to the Twitch channel. So I super appreciate that. I always appreciate good feedback like that, and glad everything's slowly intertwined. So thank you so much, Jungle Spider, for joining the podcast. I appreciate it. And a little bit of love to
love that name.
Jungle Spider. Yeah, I think it's totally legit. And they have it spelled like the I want to say, is it the Porsche Spider or is it Cayenne Spider? What car is a spider?
I think, yeah, I'm not sure which one, because I think there's multiple spiders in the car world, but it's also a ski brand that I see a lot here in Colorado.
Oh, hey, there you go. Look at that. It's always fun. It's always fun to find out where people's name origins are. You know,
Sure.
like I came across a Blackguard, and I thought it was because of this book. I finished reading this book series, and he was like, "No, it was because of something else." I was like, oh, "Okay, cool." And then, of course, lastly, I want to thank all the other resubs that continually sub to the channel and support me. It lets me know I'm doing something right. So you guys are fantastic. Thank you guys so much for doing that. But that is it. I don't want to short play you guys, but I do think we have a long episode, and I want to try to keep our shows under 2 hours. So we're going to move right into our pack one, pick one. This was a pack that Death opened up. It was kind enough to screenshot it for us to go over it. So we'll discuss it here on the show live and see if you still end up with the same conclusion. So guys, of course, you can catch this visual version of this podcast on the YouTube. So you can see if you are more of a visual learner, it would be up on your screen for you to enjoy. Okay, so starting off with the uncommons, and for speed purposes, since all three of us have it in front of us, I'll go over all the uncommons, and then John, you could probably start us off with some notables, and Death, and you can kind of counteract that, and then we'll go into the rare and the uncommons after that. Sound good?
Yeah.
So you're going to start with the commons, not the uncommons then?
Yeah, correct. I'm just gonna start with the
sounds
commons
good.
because I mean I just always like making our audience sweat. So first off, we have Herald Song. This is the slow spell for 2 and a primal, has Echo, so it makes a copy of himself when you draw it. Draw a card, then discard a card. We have Xenon Guardian, the 3/3 Radiant at common for 4 and a time, has Endurance, and then Ultimate 8 to give Xenon Guardian a 5/5/5, making it an 8/8. Good old Seek Power, the 1 cost, draw a sigil from your deck. Sabotage, 1 and a shadow slow spell. The enemy player discards a spell or attachment of your choice from their hand. Roland's Favor, the 2 and a justice slow spell. You gain 2 armor. Draw a justice sigil from your deck. Hellfire Rifle, the +3/+3 weapon for 6 red or fire. Summon the wielder, deals 3 damage to the enemy player. Second Sight, the 2 and a primal fast spell. Draw 2 cards, then put a card from your hand on top of your deck. And the last one, bringing up the finals in the commons, is the +0/+3 weapon in the form of Worn Shield, which is simply just 1 power. All right, John. So which one of these commons stand out to you?
There's a couple I'm looking at here. I think Xenon Guardian is a pretty good limited card. Seek Power as well. And then the third one I might consider here is Hellfire Rifle. But that one is much lower than the other two, in my opinion, because that's more something I'd want if I'm already going for Mastery and in Fire. So that's something I'd probably... And it's going to come around a lot later in the packs as well. So for me, it's between Xenon Guardian and Seek Power here in the commons.
Okay.
I think Herald Song is also a reasonable card here too, but I think the other three are a little bit better.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think Herald Song and Hellfire Rifle are solid considerations, but definitely not a first pick. It's not something that you're happy about first picking. Death, what about you?
So basically, John said everything that I'm thinking, because Xenon Guardian is probably like an amazing card, considering it's solid early to mid game, kinda, and late game it just pops off as a giant unit. Seek Power is also an option that's really solid, considering it's good fixing, unlike Favors or something like that, because Favor is literally an expensive power compared to this. Sabotage doesn't hit almost anything in limited, or it doesn't matter too much if it does.
Right.
Hellfire Rifle isn't too bad, but again, it costs too much, and it wouldn't be my first pick.
Yeah.
This is Hellfire Rifle has definitely never been better than in this format, but again, it's more of something you'll want to draft later.
It's solid, but again, not my first pick.
Right.
Yeah.
Herald Song, I'm not high on it, because it can be okay later on if you draw it and like you can ditch power. but if you get it early or even mid game, it's kind of dead.
Yep. The one other thing that's nice about Seek Power as well is it does a really good job of A, cleaning up your draws when you need the extra power, but B, it's also a potential muster trigger or enabler for future. I mean, it's just one power spell that you are totally always okay casting, always helps out. But all right, moving on to our uncommons, we have a Last Rite. This is the fast spell for 2 time. Sacrifice a unit to play a sigil of your choice from your deck depleted. And once again, it is fast spell. Then we have a Display of Instinct, which is the Genev display. So 3 power, fire time primal. It's a fast spell, and you can either A, deal 4 damage, B, return a unit, one of your units to your hand and gain life equal or health equal to its health, or negate an enemy spell. And then finally, we have Ice Breaker, which is the 0/3 Yeti for 3 and primal. Exhaust Icebreaker to kill a stunned enemy unit. So let me just go ahead, Death, since you've been playing a lot longer than I have. Has Icebreaker ever been a thing except in Gauntlet?
No, I had never seen it. Maybe once in casual, but I have been playing for over 2 years, and that says a lot, doesn't it?
I got something to add there. In the last Tuesday Night Eternal tournament, I played in an opponent went pretty far with his Icebreaker deck.
No kidding, seriously.
I'm not even kidding. Yeah, it was a spicy brew, and it did relatively well in the tournament. I believe it's posted on Warcry somewhere.
So let me get this straight.
It's an expedition deck.
0/3. Oh, I was gonna say a 0/3 that dies to Hailstorm or
No. It was an expedition tournament.
But expedition makes sort of sense.
It was a spicy list.
So what stun effects did they have, if we can go off a tangent for a moment?
Yeah, there was permas. There was, I think there was Anaya. There's just a lot of. I can't remember all of them. But
okay, Anaya I could get behind that because you're not spending a whole spell. Yeah, I could get behind that.
It was a powerful Huru deck with a lot of good synergy. It was kind of cool.
I think it's like a 6 drop that's a 7/7 that stuns a unit. It's Queen's Hand or something.
Oh, Danaka?
I think Daraka. Yeah, I think he might have been in the deck. And then I also think it's Rhymescale Draconis that permas all exhausted units.
Yeah, okay.
I think that may have been in the deck as well. It was a fun one.
Did they play Flash Freeze or Frostwave?
I'm sure whichever one of those was Expedition Legal was in there as well. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So yeah, Death. What are any of these 3 catching your eye? Are you still on Zenith Guardian or Seek Power?
Display of Instinct is, in my opinion, one of the strongest Throne cards or constructed cards in general. And it was something that I was considering running. This card, I mean, it can kill something. Negating a spell isn't that relevant. I mean, it can negate a fast spell, but in draft, I doubt you would leave 3 power to potentially cancel a fast spell like a combat trick or something. And returning a unit is kind of like a fast spell, but not really much. So basically only 4 damage comes into play here, in my opinion. And
I think in draft, the second ability, I mean, all 3 abilities can be relevant, but like the gain life ability can save you the damage from the attack as well as gain you additional life. It can be a pretty huge swing there. I was
considering it, but
it's kind of legit.
Pick. It's a first pick, and also it's 3 influence. So the 3 influence is basically the thing that made me back off.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's
3 influence. I don't like it.
I think that's a completely justifiable defense. Like sometimes you can take it. Like I'll be honest with you, the draft I first take it just because we were streaming. So I was like, all right, let's be bold and take it. And it's funny because we cut it from the deck twice, and then by the time we finished the deck, because I think we were only in time, but we had enough fixing for fire and primal that we put it back in. And it
overperformed, did it not?
Yeah, it actually did all 3 modes. Like the majority of the time we did 4 damage to people or to units, but one time we did exactly what we talked about. We blocked with a Grodos Favored and then bounced it to gain the life. And then I think at one point it negated Cut Ties. So that was pretty awesome. But
all 3 modes relevant.
But I can totally understand 3 power. of 3 different influence off in first pick is very dangerous.
If I got it later on, I probably would have considered picking it if it's in my colors. Like I would 100% pick it, but as a first pick, it seems kind of not that smart, or not really smart, but like not really something that I'm about, because I'm usually consistently going into either 2 or maybe later on splashing 3 colors.
No, I think you're correct. I think it's correct to look at a more single influence. All right, so let's go into our rare to finish it off. We have Temple Captain. This is the 5/5 Mystic at rare for 6 time. It has Overwhelm, and then your time units have a +1/+1. So John, where are you at on this guy?
I've never been that big on this card in any format it's been in, and I'm not really that big on it in this format either. So it's kind of medium in my opinion.
I really dislike it compared to the other captains. It's kind of bad. I mean, there's an Aegis captain. There's
A
I'm
flying
honestly
captain.
not big on
there's
any
also-
of the captains except for the primal one, right, with the flying.
I
Yeah,
don't know.
the Auric
I
one is
believe
fine
this
too.
one.
The Shadow one.
Like, and the Aegis one, in my opinion, because it makes
Gotcha.
it really difficult to deal with.
Yeah,
So this might be the worst of the bunch.
Yeah, I'm with Death. I think all three. The Shadow one with Lifesteal is great. 5/5 Lifesteal can change the game around. A 5/5 with Aegis, it gives you some leeway. Like having a big guy with Aegis means that you have a little bit of leeway to not be worried about certain things being able to take it out. And then obviously a 5/5 flyer is just absolutely huge. So
The
That
Aegis
one's
one definitely
probably the
gets
best.
better with weapons.
Yeah, true.
And yeah. I mean, other formats it's been in, there was cheaper Aegis units available, but in this format, there's just not that many. So yeah, it probably goes up here.
So here's my thing, right? So for me, I'm kind of with Death on the fact that display is a little bold to take here, especially with a couple of viable picks.
Right.
So, but then now I'm looking at Xenon Guardian. But if I'm taking Xenon Guardian, then why wouldn't I just potentially take the upgrade with Temple Captain? Because there's an argument where Temple Captain is good later because you know whether you're time or not. But then also early, you can favor time a little bit in your picks as well. So I don't know. But then obviously there's the argument where Xenon Guardian is good early and it's good late. So I don't know. Before Death tells us what he ended up picking, what do you think? What would you be on? Would you be taking the display here or the Seek Power?
I mean, maybe I like to live dangerously. I'd be on this display personally.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Death, how about you? What'd you end up taking?
So I was considering display because, it's a spell I gravitate towards removal spells most of the time, but I ended up picking Xenon Guardian.
Okay, all right. Yeah, and
Discipline first pick.
Yeah, no, I think that's a very solid first pick for exactly what we were talking about, where it's a good 4 and it's a good, late game whenever you draw it. Again, it's one influence, so you have a higher chance of playing it. And yeah, like we talked about, the captain gets better if you're primarily in a color, but the body itself, just a 5/5 or 1 for 6 is kind of underwhelming. So yeah,
It's slow for what it does. And
Right.
Overwhelm doesn't bring anything to the table. Like, the other captains at least do something.
Yeah.
Besides
Overwhelm
giving
is
you
actually
plus one.
pretty good in this format for a number of reasons, but there's options in like some of the other packs that are basically just as good, that are easier to cast and things like
comparing
that.
it to
Well,
the other captains.
Well, one thing to consider as well is like how good's the Anthem effect, and even though time has the most token generation, like how many flyers do you have? Versus the blue one or the green one, all of a sudden you might have 2 or 3 flyers on the board. You play that, and now there's a lot more damage you can get through.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something I would look at as well, is like how good the Anthem effect is, the +1/+1. And like I said, in Justice, even if the captain just sits there on the ground, you have the long tail, you have the Torrid Test Pilot now, you have the Valkyrie, the 1/1 War Cry. So there's a couple of flyers you can sneak in there, especially if you're like Huru. Now you have a ton of flyers that can potentially get pumped by the Anthem effect.
The same goes with Primal, because it's all about flyers.
Right.
Yeah.
Just be careful not to over twist your unit when they're being buffed by an Anthem like this. That's a risky maneuver.
Oh yeah, true. Yep. Luckily I think I've avoided that. I don't think that's happened to me. I don't think so, but I could be wrong. I could see that. I know I've killed my own Blurry Chaser on accident, like misclicking.
Same here. I forgot about it, and I rarely draft, so I never used Blurry Chaser except for one draft where I had 3 of them, and one was like buffed by an effect, and I wasn't sure I mean, it says end of turn, but I'm not sure if I'm using the buff or the actual HP. So I
Right.
learned
It's
the
definitely
hard
something to watch out for.
Sweet. So, all right, there you go, guys. For our pack one, pick one. If you want to be bold and live dangerously, you can Display of Instinct. And then, obviously, the more adult conservative pick is Xenon Guardian. Awesome, guys.
Yeah.
All right.
Good discussion.
So, let's jump into our main topic here, which, once again, is we're talking about how to draft control in limited or draft and sealed, right? We're going to be talking about primarily in draft, but it's something to consider. There's plenty of people that like playing control and constructed. One of the appeals to draft is that your decks constantly change, but you want to be able to build what makes you happy. And as we talked about earlier in the show, Death has primarily been a control player. I believe your fire is like below level 20 or something like that.
Everything is, I think everything is at 50 except primal. Yeah, primal and shadow. Those are like 80.
Okay,
But
fair.
fire, I think fire is 30.
Okay.
So it's way
So-
below everything.
So
there you go.
Yeah, and obviously there's some control players out there that may not like draft because of that, but the fact of the matter is you actually can build control decks, and you never know what. We're not sitting in the developer seat for Direwolf. We're not necessarily sure. I know LSV is a big fan of like gimmicky build around decks in limited, so there is a chance that eventually we see stuff like that happen, but there is a way to draft control decks. And so we're bringing on one, JohnHolio, which is a fantastic drafter all around, as well as Death, which is, once again, when he started to get into drafting, he just followed the same principles he did for building a deck and constructed, applied it to limited, and ended up working out pretty well for him. So with that, let's go ahead and, Death, why don't you start us off, and let's just talk in kind of in a big broad strokes overview. What are you looking for your deck to do to build a control deck in draft? Like, what are the things you're looking for overall?
So for this, I'm going to reference my deck building in constructed, because as you said, I use some principles from there. I'm not looking for like aggressive units, obviously, and units in general are not my first priority unless they do something. There's like a saying, the saying is dies to removal. It doesn't mean the unit can die. It means the unit comes into play and doesn't do anything, and if it dies, it didn't accomplish anything. So if it doesn't have a summon effect or an immediate action, it's less valuable in my eyes. And also, I'm looking for stuff that I know that will start generating value for me. That being either unit generation in form of Kodash sees all, or would it be unblockable units that I know will help me breach the gap if I have a lot of removal stuff. I need something that will assure my victory, let's say that. But besides that, my gaze gets drawn to obviously removal spells first. One of them being, what's wrong with me? I forgot the name of it.
Fel Ritual?
No, it's Eviscerate, actually. Yeah,
Okay.
Eviscerate or
Common.
Fel Ritual is something that I usually pick almost immediately when I see it in a pack, even if it's a first pick.
Mm-hmm.
That, or something that's like less value than maybe some units, but I still like it, is Torture, because it's been surprisingly well for me, like how it performed.
Yeah,
Especially with
Torch is
Kodash
very
Sees
strong.
All. It combos off like with Kodash Sees All. That's something that I see really often, on top of like being a removal or an option that stops exalted units, flying exalted units or something, or if an exalted buff gets transferred to a unit. So it's usually like I'm looking for value weapons, because weapons basically are removal. Sometimes
You're talking about relic weapons.
Yeah, relic weapons, my bad. I don't view, I'm just refer to them wrong, but yeah, weapons, because it lets you remove any unit that you want if it's a solid relic weapon, and sometimes they can survive depending on the unit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then you can occur a little bit of 2-for-1 action.
Sometimes. But weapons like Slayer's Edge are usually 1-for-1, but still, 5 HP is a lot. You can kill a big unit, and I'm not opposed to that. It only causes you a bit of life. And if you're in fire, you probably got some dragons, so maybe you also got to draw off that. So weapons, I kind of count as relic weapons. I count kind of as removal in draft.
Okay, so two things I want to ask you about that. One, do you count killer effects as removal?
Yes, the killer effects are quite fine. Like I forgot the name, but the 3/1 killer.
The
That's
Vorlunk?
Vorlunk?
Yep.
Yeah, that one. That's something that I don't usually draft time, I must say. I go for Argentport. One of my drafts that I forced Argentport, I went 7-0, and one was 7-2 because again I forced Argentport considering they have evasive units that are hard to deal with. And when you have evasive units and keep spewing removal, well, you don't have, not really. I mean, you have to keep them for a specific target, but still, if you have evasive units, it makes it all so worth it because the opponent has to kill it, has to have removal for it. And you don't really care about the ground units too much because you can kind of remove them if you just got a solid amount of them.
Got you. The my follow-on question to that is what number of removal? Like obviously you've already expressed things like torture and killer effects, so you're not looking for 100%. You don't want 7 fell rituals in your deck, but what number are you looking for more or less for removal when you start to feel comfortable? Like okay, I'm starting to have a decent control shell here.
I honestly have not paid too much attention to that, but I'm not sure if there's a limit because draft doesn't offer too many control spells. So even if I have like 6-7 of them, I'm still happy with that.
Sounds good.
But that's referring to like depending like if it's copies of spells. For example, like if it's something like Fell Ritual, I'm happy to have multiple copies of those because it's a straight up kill effect. But if it's something like that 5-cost kill a unit that has 5 attack or more, that's extremely situational. So usually, even if I drafted 2 of them, I'm going to run 1.
Okay, yeah, that's
Yeah.
a good point. Very good point to make. I like
Agree
that.
completely.
So John, let me pass it to you. Death kind of looked, the most of the units he's looking for are things that have value, evasive units, things can claw at the games like win cons. But in control, you also have to get to that late game and not be ran over by aggressive decks. So like, how do you approach the early part of your curve when you're trying to build a more control-y deck, John?
Yeah, sure. You're looking for more units with survivability and value, like Death said, as well as things that do something when they enter, if possible, right? So you're looking for more like defensive units with, bigger health than attack, things like that. The other units that you might look for are evasive win conditions, right? But you got to make sure you survive those early turns against, because there are very aggressive decks in this format. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm looking out for.
Okay, so
Since you mentioned that. Oh, sorry.
With Death, you mentioned Argentport a lot, so I'll start with you, John, and then we'll go over to Death. Like, how do you feel about, for example, like Elaz's Elite, the 1/4 that is for all, and it lets you decimate for free, but for all intents and purposes, for the most part, it's a 1/4, but it is for 2. So where are you at on that guy?
That's kind of a filler card for me at this point. Like I was much higher on that when the format was fresh. In a control-y deck, you're not really going to be able to capitalize much on that decimate tagline, but it is definitely a playable card because it is a defensive body for 2. 1/4 is going to block over a number of turns, and the opponent, unless they, especially if they notice that you're not going into the decimate synergy, they're not going to prioritize killing that necessarily.
Okay, Death, how about you? You can talk about one, the Elaz Elite, the 1/4, but then also maybe touch on deadly units for you as well, if you don't mind.
So when you mentioned that, I liked that card a lot. I actually put his effect to work a couple of times. Like I had 2 decimate focus decks where there was the 3-cost 2/2 unit that gets buffed every time I decimate. And I targeted decimate cards, actually.
Inquisitor.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah. It
let
gets a
me-
lot better when you're
So I
able
had
to build around it.
Inquisitor, I had 2 of those 1/4 units, and a couple of decimate effects. One of those just being the 2-cost spell that lets you make your unit evasive.
Reconnaissance. Yeah, that's got to be
Yeah,
it.
that one. I used
That's
that
really good.
because it's kind of like draw card for free, and my unit gets buffed. And besides that, I think I was rocking 3 immortalizes.
Oh, nice.
So-
Yeah, that's fantastic.
So that deck
There you go.
was like, I was surprised because I'm just gonna do a meme, like I'm just gonna get some decimate stuff. And Draft was like, yeah, sure, have some more decimate stuff.
That
But-
sounds like a great deck.
Yeah, that sounds fantastic. So, real quick, just for our listeners, Nivea's Inquisitor is a 2/2 Paladin uncommon for 3 and Justice, and he reads, when you decimate your power, Nivea's Inquisitor gets a +2/+2 permanently. And then Mastery 12, double Nivea's Inquisitor's attack and health. Yeah, and all this, and I like how the entire deck is commons and uncommons. You're talking about Immortalize, you're talking about Reconnaissance, you're talking about Nivea's Inquisitor, and you made it work.
Also, going back to 1/4 stat line, Oni's Stalwart, if that's how it's pronounced,
It is.
a card that I actually value because it lets me make a stale board. And you usually want a stale board with this mindset if you're like going into draft wanting a control deck with your removal come like evasive units or Kodash sees all that's like generational value. So you want stuff that can kind of stop the opponent from attacking.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree completely with that card. Like it actually works in Onis and aggro in some ways, but it's going to be very good basically in any control deck. So every time you block, it's threatening to get bigger to where it'll eventually start being able to block and kill things too.
So, Death, what about
That, right?
So of course there, we talk about removal. That is a form of card advantage when you're able to spend less power than your opponent or less power to answer your opponent's bigger threat. So for example, if your opponent takes 6 power from their turn to play Grotto's Favored, and then you kill it with, let's say for example, Annihilate. Well, actually Annihilate's not in the format. What am I looking for, John? I guess Fell Ritual's fine. That's fine. So you spend
fall short sometimes works.
Yeah, there you go. Fall short.
There you go.
Yeah, there you go. So you spend 2 power to answer their 6 power plus a unit, where you're still able to play something else that turn and stomp them on tempo is a form of card advantage. But let's go ahead and talk a little bit about card draw. We were talking about Argenport. Do you value things like Wisdom of the Elders or Rainfall of the Accord? Things like that. Do you actual straight up card draw in these limited control decks? And if so, how much?
Card draw is something that I would like, but I don't find it often considering it's in Primal mostly, and Primal isn't something that I usually draft. Again, like I am gravitating towards Argenport, even though I don't play that faction and Constructed, it seemed to be doing quite well for what I wanted to do in draft. But in recent time, with all the meta changes and everything, the cards that were added, I sometimes splash in fire to, for example, Warhorn on an evasive unit, so it can keep generating value, and I don't have to block with it if I have removal spells.
And then you also get access to some solid extra removal options like Conflagrate.
Yeah, basically, and just it producing multiple tokens is something that's like wonderful to me. Anything that can like produce tokens on a regular basis is something that I would go for.
Yeah, essentially one hit with the Warhorn replaces itself, because it's a +2/+2, and then you're getting a 2/2 Oni. So even if they kill your unit after that, you kind of broke even.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a great point there, where you see even someone as an avid control player leaning away from potentially a control color not to say it's stapled that, but to see what's open and more. And that's a good hot take. Like, you're looking for Argenport decks, you're looking for some kind of maybe Winchester variant there, so you have access to the most removal. Because, I mean, let's just face it, it might have changed now a little bit. I guess Argenport probably has the best removal now that we got Defiant and Vanquish for Justice. But up until then, I would have probably put it on Stone Scar, considering that they have Conflagrate and Funeral Pyre, and what's the other burn spell? John, I'm missing
Char's
one.
in the format.
Char, yeah. I feel like there's one more though.
I think Streets of Flame is, but
yeah, there you go. There you go. Yes, there you go.
See in the draft.
That's
packs,
a
but
card
it's
that
there.
I love because Scout is basically half a draw. I mean, if you scout a power, you basically draw a card when you bottom it.
Yeah, true story. Nice.
So I'm a big fan of that card because
It's also fast speed. It's a
kinda
pretty
like
good card in draft.
It's kind of like 2-for-1, how it looks to me.
It certainly can be, and like even just seeing your next draw helps you. If you have extra power to spend that turn, if you scout first, and even if you keep it on top, it helps you plan your play better that turn.
So speaking of value and Argenport, there's a card that I'm not sure if it's still in draft. You can correct me because I don't draft that often, but Mantle of Justice, is it still available?
Yes.
Yes.
So this picture is something that I got off just because of Mantle of Justice, and it's basically a win con on its own.
Do you want to break it down for the listeners for us?
Oh, I see what's going on there. That's a spicy one.
I had a couple of buffs. I think I had 2 Mantles of Justice in this deck and a Blood Nurse. So basically I gave Mantle of Justice onto my Blood Nurse and I think an additional buff, forgot what it was, but I kept twisting it to generate tokens. And every time I drew a Justice Sigil, it gained 1 health so it could produce 1 more token. So that's basically a value engine. And on top of that, I had in hand draw strength that could further increase her stats for me to make more tokens. And those are flying lifesteal tokens, so I'm not too concerned with my opponent's units because they kind of heal me, and also they're hard to deal with.
Yeah, they changed combat math.
On top of that, I had the thing that you asked about deadly. I don't usually like deadly units, like the Scorpion or whatever. I'm not sure why, but I don't like them that much. But the Varmint, when it was in the meta before it got changed, it's a 4-cost unit that can block a flyer or kill any unit, and with Nightfall it replaces it. So that's the only deadly unit I was.
Okay.
I think in draft, the 1/1 deadly units are like serviceable. They go way up in value when you can do something additional with them, like give it killer or immortalize and things like that.
Yeah, immortalize I think is
so
the nut
ping
draw.
effects, like
that's
ice bow.
That's one of the reasons why I liked Varmint, because it's in colors where you would run Immortal, and it gives something deadly and flying on top of it drawing you a card because of Nightfall and also blocking something.
Pretty sure that's not in the current format, unfortunately.
It's not in the current format. It was in the previous one. I'm just mentioning it because
Sure.
it was in my hand.
Gotcha.
But the current one, I don't see many deadly units that I like, actually.
The shoot, I just had it and it just slipped my mind now.
Thinking of the Hellkite?
No. It was no. It was removal value. Go ahead. You guys keep talking. It'll come to me. I had a really good question. I lost it for a moment. Go ahead. You guys can keep. What was it? I remember now. Okay, so Death, you talked about Scout. You talked about early units and stuff. So let's bring up something. Because most of the time it looks like you're going to be in a shadow. How do you feel on Crooked Alley Guide? The 3/3.
I love that card.
Yeah. So Crooked Alley Guide is a 3/3 for 3 with Scout, but you can also shift it for 1. So
I usually wait a minute. I usually shift it for 1. That's because you usually have play later on. The units we mentioned either being like the 2/1/4 units, one being a 3 cost, one being a 2 cost. But this is kind of a card that somewhat replaces itself. Scout isn't completely a draw, but it can help you get your power if you're lacking power. It can help you move that power or plan your next move. So I think that card is extremely valuable.
All right. Yeah, that sounds good. So, how many win cons are you looking for? Because obviously, you're looking for stuff that solidifies your win. Things that you're not looking for just a measly 4/4 flyer. You're looking for cards that will for sure close out the game. So, how many win cons do you typically run in your control decks that you're happy with?
Well, it depends. So, Bane Wolf, I mean, not Bane Wolf, Befoul is kind of like a win con, isn't it?
Oh yeah, for sure.
So I'm trying to look for that picture, but I don't think I can find that screenshot currently. Maybe I will later. But I had a game with I had Kodash Sees All, and I had 4 Bane Wolves on my board. One was played, and the rest were summoned from Befoul by removing those birds. The birds were just tokens, and they basically produced giant units that outright won me the game. So
Well, now you're just toying with your opponent. You're like, here's one win con, but nope, I'm gonna kill you this way.
I mean, I'm not sure if that's correct because Kodash Sees All can be removed. I had seen it being removed multiple times, especially with the 1/3 unit that you can shift and destroy a relic. It's a fire unit. I'm not
Yeah,
sure.
3/1, 3/1. The
Stronghold Vandal.
Yeah.
That one. So I don't think of it as a secure win con just because of that.
Yeah, I do think the jig is up on Kodash Sees All. I think initially in the format, everyone was passing it because they were like, man, this is 7 cost, like, do almost nothing. Yeah, no. And then I think now everyone knows how powerful the card is.
You probably remember when you asked me what do you think of the card, and like my immediate response was that I loved the card because it reminded me of my favorite card in the game, being Whispers in the Void, because it generates tokens, and if you're stalling the game like you do in the like control-based strategies we're talking about, it's everything that you want and more because those are flying units.
Right. The downside between that and
Being
Whispers
a
is that it's just easier for the opponent to interact with, right?
Yeah. I love Whispers for the reason of it stays in the void and it's almost impossible to remove except with Waylay and Steward of the Past, but those are constructed things. But that
Yeah, Waylay is in the draft format, but it's not a. Even
that's
if you
just
end up with it in your pool, people don't really play it
yeah,
usually.
everyone's gonna pass on it because you're not running 4 of one card and
Right.
really running win conditions.
Minimal impact in draft.
Sweet.
So, yeah.
John, how about
I'm
you?
not sure about the exact number, by the way, of win cons, but I attempt to like go for a couple of big units and maybe something other. As I said, like Befoul or Kodash Sees All.
Well, I mean, one of the benefits to it is that typically with control decks, you plan on winning the long game. So you want your games to go longer, which means you're going to inherently see more cards of your deck. So you have the option, as long as you have those, hey, if I play this, I'm going to win for sure type cards, then you have that. Go ahead.
Can we move a bit to what's called sealed? Because I want to mention something that I did it sealed once. I don't play often.
All right, give me 1 second. John, do you have anything else to add before we move on? No, you're good.
Yeah, I mean, so the number obviously depends on like you say, you're planning to see more cards. But if you have any way to tutor or fetch things, that number can go lower. But yeah, you're looking for win cons with inevitability. Or the ability to protect those win cons or fetch them. So yeah, I mean, I'm looking for between like 2 and 4 in a control deck that are just like definitely going to win.
Yeah.
All right.
Since you mentioned that, basically I had one game that had 2 Pearls choice and 2 Kodash Seeks All with the bird that has like mastery to get any curse.
There you go.
So the rest of the deck was basically survival.
And right, yeah. You got 3 ways to tutor right there. That's very powerful.
And I had multiple curses actually. One in the form of torture, others being I'm not sure if I had mistrust or unkindness, but one or the other. So that actually synergized, and what I was fine with just having 2 Kodar C's all as my win con because I was able to tutor them.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So on that note, because that actually came up for a deck, a recent draft of mine where I actually went Linray or whatever it is for the curses deck, and I ran into this issue of when I had same thing, 2 Kodashis all. So we were past a ton of curses. I think I ended up with like a potential of 12 curses. So where do you draw the line, Death, as far as if you are planning on winning with Kodashis all on your curse count? Because there were obviously with 12 curses, there were plenty of them that I could have cut because I was like, okay, I can include it in the deck for more synergy, or if it doesn't do enough, I can cut it. So do you have like any rhythmic that you use on that or heuristic you use for that?
Again, I don't have a specific number on those, but I'm thinking like if a curse is really impactful, for example, mistrust, I think that one is really good. Or torture,
Unkindness?
unkindness also. I would use as many of those as I had. Maybe unkindness actually maybe one of them because it doesn't go off as often as you would like actually.
Yeah, most
So-
of your opponents are trying to play a unit every turn if they can.
So one is enough, but that one stays so it can actually benefit curse synergy. But
yeah.
kind of. But again, really impactful curses. I wouldn't take like just any curse. For example, the one cost give a unit -2/-1. I would just instantly remove that one.
Or electrostatic distortion.
I mean, control decks, even in draft, I think are playing somewhat catch up always. So you kind of really want something that's immediately impactful, not something that's mediocre. So I wouldn't keep just all curses.
Yeah. So you talked about affliction, the -2/-1. What are your thoughts on Mark of Shame, the -3/-0?
I had it. I drafted it in a recent deck. Ended up cutting it because I didn't think it does enough, and because I had better stuff to put in. But that deck also didn't have Kodar Seas all, so I might rethink that in other circumstances.
See, I think Kodash Seasall is basically good enough just by itself.
It is.
It just gets better and better if you can have more curses on the board, but it's like perfectly fine
like
just by itself.
Won me the game, like with that being just the only curse in my deck.
Exactly.
So I don't think multiple curses are needed. That's why I'm saying only impactful curses are something I would leave in my deck.
Okay.
Something that is either removal, unit generation.
That's a good hot take. I like that.
Yeah, I think like torture and even affliction is probably just a little bit better than Mark of Shame, especially since you can, get a Mark of Shame on a unit. Basically, there's multiple ones that kind of have that kind of effect. So it's usually one of the first things that gets cut if I was kind of draft a deck in that style.
That's true. There's the 2/2 that you can sacrifice to play Mark of Shame.
Right. Mm-hmm. There's also like the short beak or whatever, and like the other Primal Justice Flyer. They both kind of slap things like Mark of Shames on units.
I mean, isn't the short beak -1?
Yes, but I mean, it's it's similar in some ways, and it comes with an evasive threat too. So I think that's much better.
And so for that note, I would take Shamebearer because it can be an early unit that it can either block or do something.
Absolutely.
But just straight up Mark of Shame now.
All right, last unit I want to talk about, and then we'll touch on one more thing before we go into sealed. What is your hot take on Valkyrie Accuser, the 3/5 flyer with Aegis that could play timidity on a unit, which means it cannot attack if you have onslaught triggered?
I really love that card because it's a flyer, has Aegis, and it basically makes a unit semi-useful unless it's a flyer, considering now it can't attack, and also it can't block because Accuser is flying and just flies over its head. And also it's a solid blocker with its stats.
So are you taking it over or under a Befoul and or Banewolf?
Over Banewolf probably because it has evasion and it has semi-removal. Over Befoul, no, if I have Kodash Sees All. If I'm planning to go for it. And it's a common card, so I might not take it over Befoul.
Okay.
As strange as it is, because you're going late game, the opponent ends up having more cards in the void, considering you're killing them with removal, so you would often get 2 Bane Wolves in that strategy.
Another reason you typically will try to run like Immortalize or something like that in a deck like this, right? So like the only thing better than a 7/6 unblockable, if it managed to proc that, is a flying Aegis with Exalted, right? Like it gives you evasion and protection. So it's like, oof, that's premium right there.
Well, plus the double removal, because you assume you timidity the first time you play it, and then you timidity the second time you play it. So
yeah,
so
I think it's a strong card.
I'm still not sure if I would take it over Befoul, but that's situational.
Yeah. I think in a lot of decks it's going to be better than Befoul, because Befoul needs if your deck is built with that in mind already, with things that you're more than willing to or happy to even sacrifice, then yeah, Befoul, and you're guaranteed to get that additional wolf out of it, then yeah, it's better. But like the Accuser really doesn't take any of that setup to be good.
That's why I said I'm not sure what to say about it. I said it's situational. I'll probably take Accuser over it most of the time, but not always.
Fair enough.
Okay, and last thing, John, you can kick us off on this one. Power base. Are you considering your power base for your quote-unquote control deck or controlled flavor mid-range any differently than you would any other type of deck? Are you considering running more power, less fixing? What's up?
Oh, absolutely different. There's some low to the ground aggro decks where you can easily get away with 16 power in draft. And then the longer in the game you're trying to go, the more power you're going to need. And the fixing is more of a function of like when those colors that you're trying to fix for, that you want access to, like if they're late game cards, it's not as big of a deal and things like that. But yeah, like in a more controlling deck, I'm typically running 18 power and maybe even a Seek. Like if I'm always trying to get to that 7 or 8 power mark on time. So yeah, I think in mid-range decks, I tend to go like 17 plus a Seek if possible, but sometimes just 17 or 18 straight up.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Death, do you have anything to add to that, brother?
I mean, I actually prioritize fixing while I'm looking at cards. Not over some bombs or removal, but if it's just units, I'm gonna take probably fixing, because if I'm running like a 3-color, and I have been doing that in recent time, so yeah, that's a pretty good choice. But when it comes to power, I'm usually around 17 always. I don't know if I'm going to 18 because I like to stack my deck with value, but I'm not. I don't draft that often to say that's something that's a good statement, but I don't like to go to 18 that much, because I really don't like getting, and that kind of opens the floodgates just a tiny bit.
Fair.
It definitely can. I've drafted a ton, and I don't know that the number of times I flood out is consistent with like me running 16 or 18 power at all. It just happens sometimes, even when I'm running 16 power,
That might be a good metric to keep track of, you know what I mean? Just slowly, like every time
over time I've gone up on like my base power line, just in general. Like when I first started playing Eternal Draft, I was always going for the lowest number possible because I hate getting flooded. But like I said, like over time it doesn't really seem to matter as much, and it matters more when you're trying to hit that key card at 7 or 8 power or something in your deck, and you just want to make sure you have it on time. So that's why I've kind of gone up over time.
The problem with me is I tend to favor more power over less, and the reason being is that I at least feel like if I'm flooding, I'm able to play the gas that I do draw, versus there's nothing worse than seeing your hand full of gas and then being stuck on like 2, 3, or 4 power. In fact, I lost the game today with a sight and 2 6-drops in my hand, and I was stuck at 5 for like 4 turns. So, but you know that
it's a tough line. You know, I don't think there is any actual right answer.
Yeah,
like 100% of the time.
But when it comes to that, like a lot of removal is around the cost of 3, 4, and 5. And I had games where I was stuck at, I think, 4, and I kept playing stuff like Torture or Fell Ritual. And it didn't actually matter that my opponent was playing big units. And when I eventually got to my power, I could just play some of my big stuff, but it didn't interrupt my tempo too much because...
So in that case, your deck is built around the idea that you don't have to have that powerful thing on time. And so you don't mind waiting a few turns. Absolutely.
That's what I'm saying, like 7, and I never go to 18 or like not even close to 19.
Yeah, fair enough.
Yeah, and that's a perfect segue. The last thing I wanted to mention is just when you are looking at your deck and you have that extra layer of removal spells that you might have not normally seen in a more aggro deck, realize that when you are placing those in your curve, that not every removal spell goes on where it's curved. Like for example, you may not play that Fell Ritual on 4. You may actually play it on 6 or 7. So just something to take in consideration when you are looking at your curve versus something like a Torture or maybe an Affliction or a Conflagrate. You very easily might play that on 2, 3, or 4 depending on what your opponent's doing. But I think that is good enough on that. So Death, if you do want to go ahead and slide into Sealed for a little bit, I think you're cleared to go, brother.
What I wanted to mention about Sealed is only thing was, I think the card is called Quicksilver Mirror, and that's something I got out of one of my sealed pools, and I forgot what card was it, but it allowed me to draw it. Maybe it was Display of Knowledge, I think.
That's probably right.
Or I think it was something like that because it allowed me to draw a relic. So basically that was my win con, and I think that was...
You're talking about the legendary?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, the Quicksilver Mirror.
Yeah, I was thinking for a second it might be the shield. You know what I'm talking about? The weapon that copies. That's why I was...
I know. Yeah.
All right, so the Quicksilver Mirror is a 7-cost triple primal relic at legendary that reads, at the start of your turn, play a copy of one of your units. All right, go ahead, continue, Death. I just want to make sure our listeners had it.
So basically that did the same thing as Kodash Sees All, but I'm not sure if I should say more efficiently or not, because it kept summoning big units, and I think I had that 4-cost 3/3 unit that unsummons stuns a unit. The Jotun guy, whatever his name is.
Oh yeah.
So that unit every turn stunned another unit. Or that was one of them. The other one was a 6-drop that's a 4/4 and turns all of your cards in your hand into flying snakes. So that came surprisingly useful because it kept turning
Hatchery
my power.
Hunter?
Maybe?
I think that's the name.
You sound right.
It's in the current draft format, so I've seen it recently.
Yep, you're right, Hatchery Hunter.
So the mirror kept copying that card, and I mean when I wanted, obviously, and that was when I flooded. So it turned all my power
into spicy
flying snakes. So that's another. That's another example.
I like that.
Like one win con that you can tutor, winning you the game, straight out. And the rest of if you can do that, or if you know that you can do that, rest of your deck can probably be just ways of surviving until then. Because you're just going to outvalue your opponent. So that's another point. Looking at, can you outvalue your opponent with a single thing?
Sweet. All right, John, do you have anything to add about control in a sealed format?
Not really. You know, like sealed, it's you don't get to choose your deck so much as in draft, right? So it's
a mess.
If you happen to get some stuff like that, yeah, I'd go for it. But it's a lot harder to build it on purpose.
Yeah,
we're just using.
Considering what John just talked about, where the fact that the sealed format is typically a little bit slower because of the fact that you can't pick your pool, means that you are able to be a little bolder with your deck building, only because you can expect, especially like for example week 1 where everyone's decks are the weakest, is where you're able to get a little greedier with your deck building because you can anticipate everyone else's decks being at a similar level. So that's at one point where you might have access to a more slower deck or a more controlly deck because of the fact that you can expect less streamlined aggressive decks in the format, or in the field I should say. So that's going to do it for our building a control flavored mid-range deck in draft. Hope you guys got some ideas and tips there. Obviously, it was a little specific in some parts, talking specifically about Argenport in this format, or even a Rakano version or Stone Scar, but also some broad strokes because we do want you to have tips and tricks to be able to apply to different formats. Yeah, if you have any more questions or any more tips you want to add, by all means, let us know in the comments below, or jump in on the Discord and have a conversation with us. We'd be happy to have you. Oh, yeah. So that's going to move us into our constructed corner this week. We're going to have a slightly bigger constructed corner because we literally just finished the ECQ, the Throne ECQ this weekend. We are recording on Sunday this time. And yeah, so congratulations once again to JohnHolio making top 64 with one of his own brews. So good job there, buddy.
Yeah, thank you.
We will be talking about both decks, but in a moment, I want to go ahead and mention, just shout out to Cola Coma, which was the winner of this week's ECQ, or this month's ECQ. So I believe they won what, $1,000 in an invite.
Yeah, invite to Worlds and $1,000. Not bad.
And some packs. Yeah, sweet.
Oh yeah, also packs.
Yeah, there. Hey, the packs matter, man. A lot of people, that's that crafting dust right there, or people like me, the completionist that want to get my full collection. That being said, the finals was double Reanimator, which, John, did you double check? Were there only 2 Reanimator decks in the format?
I think there was 3.
Let me double check that.
The announcer said there were only 2. That I do remember.
2 in the top 64.
Hold on one second. Reanimator. Oh, he did it 3.1%. So I need to find the other thread. That's fine. I'll let you guys talk while I look it up. But yep. So
yeah, I'm not sure.
Death, I know you had something to say about the meta, and so let's start us off with. So actually, I think because you're going to go on a little bit of a rant here, John, what's your opinion on double Reanimator? So one of the timed and tested and true decks of the format, with the only real modification to the deck being the addition of Felrock. And I believe that's it. I think everything else is just old cards. So
it definitely looked pretty standard, like isomorphic old build basically. Yeah.
So what's your opinion on that, real quick, and then we'll move it on to Death to take the mic in the soapbox.
Yeah, I'm surprised by that, and it's cool. I was, I didn't really tune my deck for any Reanimator matchups, but one of the people in the top 4 was I played on during my run, and like my deck is fine against Reanimator, because I just decree at the right time and just shut down their whole strategy basically. But I didn't tune it specifically for that. I certainly didn't expect to see a lot of it this weekend, and so it's really interesting that that was the 2 finalists. I mean,
do you think they just kind of took advantage of a window when everyone was testing new decks? They just kind of forgot about good old Reanimator, and then obviously tomorrow when everyone adjusts, it'll be out of the limelight again.
Yeah, I mean, maybe we'll see more just hate cards show up in markets in the next week or 2 if it becomes flavor of the week or whatever again. Okay, but yeah, people have been kind of slacking on bringing hate cards for specifically Reanimator, because I don't think a lot of people were expecting to see that. Now, I definitely was expecting some Feln, which is not a great matchup for like what I brought, but yeah, not Reanimator in particular. Okay, one last thing before I hand it over to you, Death, just to do a quick meta breakdown of the top 64 that was kindly posted by Kamato. 3 Xenon decks, 4 Rakano Valkyries, 4 Spellcrag, which I think they include your deck. I'm not really sure. Maybe not. I don't think so. I think there was 5, including mine. Oh, okay. All right. You did have. We'll talk about yours in a minute, anyway. So I won't go into depth in it right now. Fire Justice Shadow. There were 11 decks, which is Winchest. Then Fire Time Justice, which is Zulta. There was 5 decks, or wait, I said 11, right? 11 Winchest, 5 Zoltan decks. Elysian Aggro had 3. Argenport had 3. Combray Aggro was the public enemy number 1 apparently, and with 12 decks in the top 64.
2 Night Maul decks, 2 Praxis Midrange, 4 Stone Scar Beatdown, 2 Reanimator decks. So there's our answer. Literally the only 2 Reanimator decks made it all the way to the finals. Wow. So there might, like I said, there might have been something there. Rakano Aggro, 2. Ixtin Unitless, so I guess Ixtin Control, 2. And then 5 of other decks that only had 1 copy. So
I think mine's included in there, but I'd put it under Spellcrack personally.
Yeah, I guess since there isn't fire, I guess no, you're right. Actually, I guess yours would be. So you were the only Genève that made the.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
Yeah. Okay. So that would make me definitely feel like you're in the other category then, since you were the only Genève deck. But all right, that's it. All right, Death, you have the stage, my friend. Go ahead.
So something I found really funny was what do you think? The Reanimator thing was completely ridiculous to me. And I think they went as far as they did because they didn't face a sufficient control deck. And when I say a control deck in Throne, I do not mean what some people call control. For example, Feln, when it has a couple of auras, a couple of Diesel's offices, a lot of 5-drops, it still heavily relies on units and board pressure.
It's more of a mid-range deck.
Yeah. And a lot of people in the Eternal community call decks like that control. What I'm saying is something like temporal control, something that focuses on removing everything and countering everything that the opponent is playing. So I think the ECQ was lacking that. And I'm not putting in combo decks with control decks. Combo decks with like something like Spellcrack.
Do you count Reanimator as a combo deck?
I do.
Yeah, I would also.
So I'm saying because my deck, what was running, it's funny enough, it would completely counter Reanimator since I had 4 main deck Shenra Speaks and I had main deck Waylay. So 1 Waylay actually completely removed, and I also had counter spells in forms of Unseal, so it would stop Grasping at Shadows. So I just think the meta was too aggressive in general for it to be able to stop Reanimator.
Mm-hmm.
But when it comes to the overall meta and everything that I saw in the ECQ, it was literally a compilation of everything I saw all over the couple of years I've been playing. And it was from different time periods. It was like everyone took a specific deck that was good in that period and modified it a bit with new cards. For example, I already mentioned it, I started playing like over 2 years ago, and at that time, the most prominent and commonly used decks were Fel Control, and I'm calling this Control because it was more focused on spells and stuff like that, and it had main deck Gift, but the core was Blacksky Harbingers and Champions of Cunning, kind of similar to this deck. No Ross though.
Mm-hmm.
And another deck that was extremely common when I started was the other 50% of players that was called Icaria Black. That's basically FJS. It was called that because it was a bit different. It was Icaria with Macto for value, but the rest of the deck was kind of similar. So that's one part of it. Next, then let's move a couple of years forward. We're seeing stuff like Combray Aggro, but with Alessi, with Stand Together in the main deck, with Sword of Stand Together, how we call it, Sword of Unity.
Sword of Unity.
Yeah, stuff like that. Like ways to draw Alessi with the 4-cost Minotaur that tutors a 1-drop.
Ground Watch Press Gang.
Yeah, move a couple of years later, then you have Peak Control. What were the colors? I think
it's usually Genève Peaks.
Yeah, I think it was like Genève.
That sounds about right.
And what are the other ones? There was another one. Skycrag was prominent a couple of months ago, but it was a different form. This is new.
You talking about more like Yetis or
no? I'm talking about Cradle Skycrag.
Oh,
But this is complete. This one was the only completely new one, the Spellcrag, because it was made possible with the inclusion of Prodigy Sorcery.
right.
Everything I saw it was extremely aggro or combo, or like, I mean, mid range is still more aggro than control. That's what I mean by more aggro.
Mhm.
And the meta wasn't something that pleased me at all, because when I was playing, like 50% of my games, or maybe even more, 70% of my games were against Combre aggro. That's almost everything I saw. And the other stuff that I saw was Spellcrag, and that's the only thing I saw in the first round of the ECQ. And my deck did poorly because it was made to counter a meta previously used. And it did quite well in Throne duels before that, going to an average of 5 wins usually. And then suddenly, meta like flipped itself upside down, and it did extremely poorly, because I wasn't running too many counter spells to stop Spellcrag, and I wasn't running stuff that can actually enough early interaction to stop Combre aggro, because I don't know, stand together is something I hate. And when you're running four harsh rules and 4 Shenra Speaks, it makes it obsolete.
Yeah, you just spent 5 power just breaking some Aegises and passing the turn.
I think I was using Hailstorm before that, 4 in the main, but I took it out because it didn't do much in ranked, actually, in when I was playing Throne, because I was already gonna kill everything with Harshul or Shenra Speaks, so I didn't see much use of it to replace stuff like Ice Bolt. And eventually, I think I left only 2 Ice Bolts, because that also wasn't seeing too much play. Then when I went into the ECQ, I realized I actually needed some. So yeah, it was, I misjudged the meta, but also the meta was really strange and not enjoyable. It was taking each successful deck that everyone hated in previous years, including Reanimator. That was the most hated deck when it was a thing, like when Azendel was introduced, the new one. So it just felt like that someone just decided to take the best decks from one specific season and just let's try this in the new.
Well, I mean, at the very least, it says that it was a diverse meta. You know, what do we have in the top 64 that I covered like 12 different archetypes? So, I mean,
Yeah, I mean,
that says something.
I want to say it's a diverse meta, but almost everything I faced was Combre aggro. So there are a couple.
It was
of
the
players,
highest represented deck, so that makes sense.
Those, so a lot of players were, well, not, yeah, people were mostly gravitating towards that deck.
I think one reason for that might be is, you know, aggro is generally a little bit easier to play, especially if you're just fresh on a deck. So, I mean, that's part of it, right? If you just pick up a deck online, you're like, oh, I'll just run this, right? If it's a controller mid-range deck, there's a lot more, you know, tough decision points and things like that. And you really have to know the meta and your opponents to perform, you know, above the bar with those kind of decks. So it makes sense that you'd see more of that.
I agree. I agree. It's definitely not the easiest.
I just want to add something.
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Basically, the finals of the ECQ, so I mean day 2 of ECQ, that was today, was not that annoying as the first day, because when it comes to the first day, I said I only saw 2 types of decks, and I think only one Nightmaw deck. And
I saw a much more diverse showing in my day 1 run, but I mean the highest percentage was definitely I want to say it was tied Combre with the Rakano Valks deck, because I did it on the second kind of day available, and by then Sunny's list was very much out there, right? So
I would prefer to face that, honestly, because almost like I think most of my games look like this. Combre aggro player decided to play either a 1-drop or a 2-drop, and a 3-drop was always Nash, and they always had stand together on either 4 or 5.
Yeah.
And I instantly lost because he didn't prepare for that. That came out of nowhere for me. So I kind of got tilted and didn't play half of my games.
Oh, okay. So you could have run into more decks,
Actually,
but yeah, you
well,
only played 14 or so.
No, 6 games were left. My bad.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's much closer.
Yeah.
So I didn't want to bother with those 6 games because I knew I was just face comp rate.
And you started pretty early on the first day, right?
Kinda. I started like 3 or 4 hours after it was released.
Yeah, I'd put that in the pretty early category. Yeah. Okay.
All right. Well, do you want to talk a little bit about your deck? I have it up on screen here. So
Me or John?
you, Death. We'll finish it off with John, since
Sure.
you're kind of got the momentum right now. So if you want to talk about a
Exactly.
little bit about the deck, then by all means. Like I said, I have it on screen here. If you want me to go card by card on this 90 card animal, then I'd be happy to. But if you want to just touch on key points, of course, those of you that are interested in this deck, it is completely serviceable. He has have a winning record in Throne with it. Even got to Masters with it. I'm gonna have the link to it on Eternal Warcry in the show notes, so you guys can check it out there.
So basically, before I start talking about it, I'm just gonna say quickly that this is the 90 card deck was actually a version of the one that I used in the ECQ, but instead of being 4 color, I changed it into 5 color. And fun enough, how 5 color was extremely more successful. Even so, against decks that kind of countered this one in the ECQ because of stuff I added. Just saying that's a different deck.
So I just well, you piqued my interest. What color did you add? What was the 5th color?
There are only 5 colors.
Right. What was the last one added there?
Yeah, and I was gonna say I usually don't run red, so that's kind of a dead giveaway. But,
there you go.
But I actually splashed red for only 2 cards. Well, 8 cards, but 2 different types of cards.
Sure.
One is Display of Instinct, and I stand by what I said earlier. I think it's one of the strongest cards in Throne if you're playing Control. Because
Okay,
what it can do is the following. It can do 4 damage, which is huge in fast speed because it can kill a unit, kill a weapon, kill a sight.
It's also, yeah, it's 4 damage to any target, basically, yeah. Very flexible.
I had killed sights with it many times, and I also had killed relic weapons, kind of like sort of Vicario with it.
So hold on 1 second, if you don't mind, just to interject on something that I think is a key point here, because you play a lot of Control. Granted, I know you don't play Fire, but why do you think Cremate has not seen any footing in the format? Because it's a 4 power fast spell that kills sights as well as units just dead.
I can go into that. Actually, I'm using it in my Fire Time Shadow Sacrifice. It's a great card, I think, but it doesn't have too much room in like really, really control decks because you're just gonna use Harsh Rule because it kills everything, not just one thing.
Okay.
But if you don't have an option for that, I'd go for Cremate. It's an amazing card. It killed if you don't have an option for killing sights and board wipes. But
like it's a strictly better Death Strike, but that's not really played in Throne either.
Yeah. Do you have a take
if
on,
you're in Stone Scar?
Do you have a hot take on it at all, John?
Yeah, I've literally never seen it played in Throne, but it's a very good card in Expedition, that's for sure.
I mean, I played it because I put it in when I was experimenting with Dragon decks, but yeah, I've never seen it from anybody, and I'm not really quite sure why. Like, you can say the influence requirement is tough, but I mean, I think it's a perfect card for Stone Scar.
It's not a card that and it's easily splashable. That is true. But
I just haven't seen many Stone Scar control decks, I guess.
Yeah,
right? Most Stone Scar decks are much lower to the ground.
Well, Winchest isn't playing it either.
Winchest
right. Well, they have
an
units too.
Yeah, and there's an option of Harsh Rule there.
Well, here's
better removal. better AoE removal. When it's a single target thing, it usually, like, Feln has a lot of single target things, so it belongs in Felnscar, but people usually don't run too much Felnscar in Throne. It's not that good.
Yeah, that's not a combo you really see often in Throne at all.
In Expedition, it does seem really good, like Felnscar control, but it's rarely seen for some reason, because Expedition is more of an aggro format.
Okay, all right. Like I said, I just wanted to touch on that. That was a slight point that I've noted, and I figured that was a good time to bring it up. But please continue. Sure. I apologize for putting on a tangent.
Now you can read my deck if you want.
Oh, thanks. All right.
All 90.
Here we go. All right. 1 Fire Sigil, 2 Reread, 3 Wisdom of the Elders.
You're doing that's a weird order, but
Jedi, you're weird.
Can I do my part? Can I be a host? Hey guys, can I do my thing on my podcast? Is that possible?
Right,
I have it broken up by factions on Eternal Warcry. You have it by the single list. All right, hold on. Let me change it to the detailed list. So I'll scroll down the list on screen. No, it's cool. It's cool.
You usually read it like from top to bottom.
I still did. When you guys look at the YouTube video, it's gonna make sense because I had the whole deck up on screen. Now I have to scroll through it, but that's fine. Is the first
one Fire Sigil?
Is the first card? Is the first card Seek Power? Is that correct for you guys? Is it Seek Power into Equivocate? Can I do that?
It can be.
It's not. Is it wrong again?
I'm messing with you. Continue.
Oh, thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So 2 Seek Power, 2 Equivocate, 4 Petition, 2 Reread, 4 Blight Pass Smuggler, 3 Display of Instinct, 4 Display of Knowledge, a Death Premium pet card, 4 Eben Dune Smuggler, 2 Waylay, 3 Wisdom of the Elders, 3 Honor of Claws, 3 Mask of Torment, 1 Memento Mori, 4 Garden of Omens, 3 Harsh Rule, 4 Shinra Speaks, 1 Stronghold's Visage, 3 Brilliant Idea, 1 End of the Story, 2 Stormhalt Knife, 1 Azendel's Gift, 2 Diz's Office, 1 Temporal Distortion, 1 The Last Word, jeez, 1 Fire Sigil, 1 Justice Sigil, 1 Primal Sigil, 1 Shadow Sigil, 1 Time Sigil. I feel like I'm being trolled. 4 Cobalt Waystone, 2 Crest of Chaos. That's why you made me read it. Oh, you're such a troll. 2 Crest of Cunning, 2 Crest of Fury, all right, 2 of all the crests, minus 3 Crest of Order, which is the Huru one for some strange reason. And then somehow Death has a market of 12 cards. No, I'm just kidding. It's a 5-card market. 1 Disjunction, 1 Malediction, 1 Whispers in the Void, 1 Vicious Rejuvenation. I wonder how bad everyone. I wonder if people, like, if their abs are hurting or if they're crying listening to this on the drive to work. And 1 finally Scourge of Frostholm, and that's the deck.
You started laughing right where like Stronghold's visage was. What was so funny? Was it all the one-offs?
No, that I was still not even halfway through the deck.
Right.
All right. Death, tell us about
this. Might be the longest list I've ever seen on Warcry. So you get that award.
Probably not, right? Because isn't there somebody a streamer that does like 100 card singleton against?
That's true. But those aren't real decks. Those are for fun.
The thing is, I have a screenshot, if you want to show it on screen, of this deck actually having a perfect record. I'm gonna post it if you want to.
Yeah, that's fine. Mine as well.
It's a joke.
No, yeah, we're just laughing, but no, this is a real deck.
Yeah, there you go, guys. Match history in Throne, so as you guys can tell. So there you go. But of note.
Diamond 1.
So hold on, one question though, because I see 13 turns, 13 turns, 13 turns, 9 turns, 13 turns, and then 6 turns. What happened in that 6-turn game?
I used End of the Story and my opponent conceded.
Oh, okay. All right.
And that was my last game that led me to Masters this
Yeah,
month.
because I was just gonna say, I'm like, how does this deck win on turn 6?
Yeah, I usually like all of
An
these
opponent
games
that doesn't have as much free time as the other guys.
Fair.
except like the 22, the one that you can't really see the number, but it's 22 turns, the last one, where the picture is.
Oh my god.
Yeah, basically that's the normal time that I usually win if the opponent wants me to play it through. 13 turns is because my opponent conceded.
Got you. Well, there you go,
So-
guys. If you have nothing but time on your hands and want to take the scenic route up to Masters, Death's 90 card destruction. It's I feel like this deck treats you like that the Blood Elf does. The 2/3 on 1 that pings you every turn. I feel like this is what this deck is incarnate. Like, you play it and it's powerful, but at a price. You're eating a day. You're taking away life at the end of your life while you play this.
So I should get into this deck probably, and I'm gonna.
Oh God, we're just now getting into it.
So
We're going to
basically,
talk about the strategy.
I'm just gonna say I'm not a fan of units, as you might notice that this is a unitless deck, and I usually don't, because I see a unit, it can die. Therefore, there's a saying dies to removal. And instead, I decided to also, another thing that like came to my mind when I was building this deck, I want to stop my opponent from playing the game. I just don't want my
Oh,
opponent
that sounds
to play
fun.
cards, because I don't want cards from my opponent. I don't want to see that. Who needs to see that? That's why I have a couple of cards to do that. For example, Waylay. In my previous builds, I was using 3 Waylay, but I'm attempting with like 2 because you got Garden of Moments. Almost everything is board wipes. Like everything's. That's why I don't have, for example, Cremate, a single target removal. The only thing it would do for me is kill sites, and I'm using Display of Instinct to do that. On top of that, Display of Instinct can negate spells, and that's something that's extremely prominent seen in Spellcrack currently, right?
It's a good point. So it's almost like a even more flexible, even cheaper cremate in this sense.
Mm-hmm.
And also the ability to return a unit to your hand actually can let you recycle merchants if you need to do so.
Even
But
relevant in a unitless deck.
Yeah. So,
Sure.
and actually, you need every card in your market, so that can come in. Well, not all the time, but all of them are useful, except Malediction if you're not playing against aggro. That's the only one, extremely situational. The rest of the stuff that this deck does is, how can it pull off all this insane stuff? Easy. Mask of Torment and Stronghold Visage. Visage providing 1 health every turn, and ramping me with, meaning I don't actually have to have lifesteal units to ramp, and like passively healing every turn is great because you ramp, you get additional health, and you get armor. Armor is actually extremely relevant because I'm running the Last Word, which is actually the only win con I got in here. But I use it mostly as removal. I don't sometimes win with it, and maybe wait for my opponent to concede.
So with 3 of Mask of Torment, you're hoping to draw one of those naturally, and then you're planning to usually fetch the Visage in that case?
I was using 4 masks before, but I'm tempting currently 3 masks and 1 Memento Mori. At times, like if I'm missing fixing, and that's not that common actually. John spectated some of my test games with this, and it was extremely efficient to his surprise. Care to share on that?
Oh no, I mean you're not wrong. I never saw you get messed up on your power or your influence really at all. I was shocked, but it was working from the get-go from what I was seeing.
I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I'm gonna give this a deck a shot. So,
I mean, if you got some free time, it looks like it might be fun for you at least.
I mean, I'll play a game or two. I'll play a game or two.
I'll try anything once.
So basically, Petition played a big role in this, considering it can grab not just power, like regular power, I mean sigils, it can grab crests. And crests letting you seek and fix your power is huge. And considering all the power base is crests beside one of each sigil, since you got seek power to help with that, it's actually like really helpful with that. I had one game where I was at turn 3 and I had 2 of each influence because I'm using all crests. And you're actually not concerned about depleted power. All of your power is depleted. That's how it goes.
Because you weren't playing slow enough.
Yeah, and your double influence comes later in the game, so like you can basically get there with one of each pretty early.
The only thing that's double influence is Wisdom of the Elders that you kind of want to play, but even playing it on 4 isn't too bad. And only thing you're attempting to do is have undepleted power on 5 to Harsh Rule or Shenra's Peaks, because that can be an instant threat. But with this version of the deck compared to the last one, I have both displays of Instinct and Knowledge that can function as amazing cards in combo sense that can like get you stuff, negate harmful spells, or Display of Knowledge that can get your one-off relics. For example, Azendel's Gift that can close out the game, The Last Word, Temporal Distortion. But also all of those function as removal. So you have 7 cards that are early interaction. And Disjunction I'm running 2 of. I'm surprised how well it did. I had Garden of Omens at one point, and I think I was at 5 HP, and my opponent played 1 big unit. And I played Equivocate for 1 power, returned that unit, so I was able to play Vicious Rejuvenation. And this is a card that I take out to the market most times. Like almost always, it's Vicious Rejuvenation or Malediction. Malediction is against aggro, but like Vicious Rejuvenation lets you just play as slow as you want, let your opponent like beat you down, and then you win the game by swapping your HP because you're back at where the game began. But you have a ton of power. On top of that, you have a ton of cards in hand, a lot of options, and your opponent was basically hitting himself in the face. So that's an interesting card that I love using. Like a lot of people don't think this is actually a usable, playable card, but I'm using Mask of Torment, and I can ramp to that point, like, rush to that point, and just swap HP. So when it comes to spell focus decks, for example, Spellcrag or any unitless control, Scourge of Frostrum just shuts that down.
Yeah, that's basically an instant concession for Spellcrag.
So
since I mentioned countering, so when it comes to Svetia or Icaria, for example, Zulta Icaria, an extremely common new deck. Zulta Arcanum, Icaria, Kairos. Waylay just gave me a win con basically because it allowed me in a couple of games I always like Waylay Icaria, and next I can either play the other one or reread the first one to remove Zult Arcanum, and my opponent just lost the way to close out the game because all of the other units are going to die to board wipes.
Are you waiting for them to grab one from the market before you waylay?
Why?
Most of those decks run a copy of Arcanum and a copy of
Kairos
in the market.
Waylay doesn't touch the hand, so it only removes stuff from the deck.
Right, so okay, so it doesn't matter if they already grab it from the market in that case.
I'm using Gift for my opponent's hand.
Okay.
Do you ever use it on merchants?
What do you mean?
Do you ever waylay for merchants?
Oh, yes. I do that often, but often in specific circumstances. So
Sure.
First waylay is usually sites. After site or win cons, for example, Icaria. After that, if I get another waylay or unit, I'm going after merchants, and that's how I won against one of those Spellcraft decks. I not only stole like those static bolts from the void, I also removed all merchants and all sites.
Okay.
Yeah, Spellcrack is almost like some kind of weird reanimator deck in some ways like that.
Yeah.
So removing Void there also is extremely relevant. That, and I've been actually facing decks on ladder in Diamond 1 or Master that are roaches or crown roaches with dread. I'm not kidding. So this removing dread and roaches also helped a lot, and also it removes Vara from the opponent's deck, instantly shutting down Reanimator. But I'm not saying like run Waylay main deck in every deck. If your deck is really slow, has a ton of draw, use this. And here I use Brilliant Idea to redraw my entire hand more times than I can count. Because like Garden of Omens lets me draw any of my spells, and usually it's end of the story, considering it puts it on the top of my deck and I can instantly play it. It's
and you're working with a stupid amount of power with multiple copies of Mask of Torment.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I quite often go above 20 power.
Right. Wow.
Yeah. Must be nice.
Going to 20 power lets you do some ridiculous stuff. For example, around that. Last Word, being able to play it and ultimate it at the same time.
Yeah.
Instantly closing out the game. So that's basically a breakdown of the deck. It gets even stupider when you got Temporal Distortion.
And you have 40 power instead of 20, basically.
Yeah, you can do whatever you want.
When you got a bunch of power, you just keep drawing and never stop. Almost never. And one of the funniest things that I did in testing that also John saw was I used the Ebon Dune Smuggler. I used the Ambush ability to grab Vicious Rejuvenation while I was at 1 HP. I let my opponent hit me in the face willingly instead of blocking until I was left with 1 HP. And when my turn started, because the merchant has Ambush, I just played Vicious Rejuvenation, and my opponent had 1 HP and died to an Ambush merchant.
Yeah, that's definitely a highlight reel worthy for sure. So we're starting to push on time, so I want to move on.
Yeah, sorry for that.
No worries.
No, you're good.
One last thing I do want to ask you about is, did you consider at all Witching Hour for this deck?
I was actually running Witching Hour before in my Whispers deck because I had many Whispers deck over the years. Many Whispers decks. Okay. One of them actually included Withering Witch because everything would die then to Spitelings.
Gotcha.
But currently I'm using Whispers for another purpose. I'm using those mainly for blockers and something that could charging units from hitting the last word. And on top of that, there's a combo actually here that I didn't mention, I forgot to mention. Mask of Torment, if you have it on your face, you usually have it on your because you can just tutor for it so easily with either Display of Knowledge or grabbing Display of Knowledge with Guardian. While you have that on your face, if you have Dizzo's or Dizzo's office, however you pronounce it, with Whispers, what happens is the Spitling block, and it deals 1 damage because it's a 1/1, and it ramps you for 1. Then it dies and it pings face again, healing and ramping you again. So every Spitling ramps you for 2. And I had games where I literally killed my own Spitelings with a board wipe just to get additional 10 power.
Okay.
Wow.
Yeah. Sweet. Well, there you have it, guys. Definitely check it out. Once again, you can catch Death on various Discords, including the EternalJourney Discord, so you guys can ask him some more questions about it. And if you want to give the deck a shot, of course, it is, let me see real quick how much it costs to make. So I'll let you guys know.
About 75k Shiftstone.
Yeah. 74,600 Shiftstone to crank this bad boy. 302,000 if you want to do it in premium. But all right. So we're getting tight on time here. So John, don't get me wrong. I don't rush it. I want you to go ahead and talk through your deck as well, because this is quite an achievement for you, because this is a brew of your own and you've been working on this deck for a very long time. Thanks, Death, for breaking down your deck, by the way. I'll thank you at the end of the show again. Yeah. So, John, let's go ahead and dive into yours. And you know what? If we go over on time, we go over on time. It's okay.
By the way, I have one warning. this deck has a really large learning curve, and I wouldn't suggest like investing into it if you don't want to be fully devoted to playing something like this. And also, it's a counter meta deck, so you might have to tweak it if the meta changes. Just warning.
All right, fair enough.
That's it.
Cool. Do you want to start with just the lists?
Sure, I could do that. Not a problem.
Yeah, go for it.
Hold on, let me go ahead and switch to the detailed list so I'm
Any
accurate
order
for you
you'd
guys.
like.
Okay, so JohnHolio's. Did you put a name on it? Let me see.
Just prodigious counterburn.
There you go. Prodigious counterburn. It is 2 Seek Power, 4 Torch, 2 Reread, 4 Static Bolt, 4 Strategize, 4 Display of Instinct, 4 Hailstorm, 4 Howling Peak Smuggler, 4 Wisdom of the Elders, 3 Honor of Claws, 4 Eclipse Dragons, 4 Garden of Omens, 4 Juten Hurler, 3 Prodigious Sorcery, 3 Fire Sigil, 3 Primal Sigil, 1 Time Sigil, 4 Cobalt Waystone, 4 Crest of Fury, 2 Crest of Impulse, 2 Crest of Wisdom, 2 Granite Waystone, 2 Seat of Fury, 1 Seat of Impulse, 1 Seat of Wisdom. And then in the market, we have 1 Edict of Shavka, 1 Permafrost, Edict of Linray, Ice Bolt, and Royal Decree. Once again, you can catch this deck on the show notes as well as on Eternal Warcry. So yeah, all right, John, take us through the journey, buddy.
Sure. So yeah, like you said, I've been working on Spellcrack deck for months because as soon as I tried the archetype, I thought it was just super fun to play and had a great win rate and things like that. So I've just been playing with all kinds of configurations and tweaking them and stuff. And as we approached this ECQ, I kept hearing other top players talking about their versions of Spellcrack and things like that. So I was expecting it to be a little more prevalent this weekend. So I decided I wanted to tune a version of it that I thought would just be, would be great, better in the mirror than any of their versions, as well as a little bit better against FTJ, which I was expecting to see more of this weekend. So I went for, for that kind of angle for this weekend, and it really got me there on day one with a great win rate. So the big differences here than your more standard Spellcrack decks, which are obviously in Skycrag only, and this one adds a time splash just for the 4 of Display of Instinct, which we've already discussed multiple times on the show today, in draft, in DeathSec as well. It's like this is the one thing tying the whole show together, I think, today, right? Display of Instinct.
Yeah, I think
it overperformed. Like, it was so good.
Again,
Sorry, go
I
ahead.
think it's one of the best cards, like in Throne generally, or in Constructed.
What were you about to say, Jedi?
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think the only one that holds a light to it or a candle to it is Display of Ambition, the Winchester one, because all 3 of modes on that one are quite relevant as well.
I think the knowledge one is almost there too. But
Yeah.
Knowledge is really, all of modes are active if you're using something like Feast Call, for example.
Yeah, very true.
Right.
Very true.
So, and the other big difference here is the Eclipse Dragons, right? And so it's not unitless, really, because I'm running 4 Eclipse Dragons. But after playtesting with these, they just one-shot every site. So I was expecting to have to deal with sites a lot. A lot of my spells also do, but the spells are even better if you can just point every one of them at face and just burn the opponent out. But the huge upside is a lot of opponents, they're, if they're running torches and things like that, they don't hit Eclipse Dragons. They have haste, so they usually get that first attack in, and then you almost always, if that happens, you're basically going to get the extra power from them on the opponent's turn too, where you can keep doing things. And a lot of the key spells here are fast speed, right? So the ideal situation is, you got your Eclipse Dragon hit in while the opponent was depleted on all their power, and then you suddenly have power on their turn where you can, if they try and kill it and you think it's important to stick around, you can use your display to counter it. If they play a unit you want to get rid of, and be power efficient, you can do that. If the opponent doesn't really do anything that you care about right then, you can re-up your hand with some Wisdom of Elders on their turn. So it has a lot of additional synergy going. And then other than that, it's very similar to a lot of the other just prodigious sorcery combo decks that you see in the format recently. And I think, yeah, 4 others in the top 64 of the ECQ today.
Yeah, I do really appreciate. I played the deck because I did not make day 2 because I am a scrub, and I've always liked Eclipse Dragon. But you are totally right. The fact that you have multiple cards that can capitalize on the 3 power bonus from Eclipse Dragon really goes a long way. And the interesting thing for me is like the use of Strategize. Just, you know, when the tuck, like there were a couple times with the deck having like a Static Bolt or Jotun Hurler. I wanted it to actually be a second sight, you know what I mean, to tuck the card back on the top of the deck. But
yeah, that's something people have tried, and I mean, I experimented with it in the early stages months ago, and just found it to be like it's just not what I'm trying to do. Yeah, like it's cheeky to do it with Static Bolts, and that's about it, right?
Gotcha. Yeah,
I mean,
I think sometimes you don't even have to use the Static Bolt. Like sometimes you can, especially once it's up to already 3 power or something, you can just snap it off and have it in the void for later. You know, you're just kind of saving it for the right time to get back with sorcery.
I had actually seen that like most often people ping me with that and leave it in the void.
Yeah, Strategize like in my other versions that are just Skycrag, I don't even run Seek power. I run 25 power and no Seeks, because Strategize, like if your opening hand is a little sketchy with just 2 power, but you have a Strategize, like you're good to go.
By the way, you advised me to attempt to use Strategize in my deck over Wisdom of the Elders. So
right.
I think this is like a deck specific thing, because Strategize works much better for you because you got echo units and other ways
exactly
to draw. And
it's fine to tuck things like sorcery away in the early turns too. Like it's a key card, but with 4 gardens, you can just get a sorcery in your hand absolutely anytime you want with this deck, basically. But like the reason I suggested that for your deck is because you run like 7 Harsh Rules main, and so sometimes that's just jamming up your hand. And like with all the depleted power, it basically lets you draw those 2 cards a little bit sooner and not care that you're tucking away one of those spells that you have 3 copies of in your hand already. So that was why I suggested that.
I know. I attempted it, but it also underperformed, because I usually need card advantage over something that I can just bin stuff.
Sure.
And most of the times in that list, I want to keep everything in my hand. But for your list with like a lot of echo and you have much cheaper stuff, I really like how it plays in.
Yeah, and the other concern with your deck before we playtested it was just the influence requirement on the Wisdom of the Elders, right? Like 2 primal, thought might not be easy to achieve on time, but no. So somehow you made that work.
A couple of things I've seen as well. I would like to talk about your market some, but let me go ahead and start off with shoot, I forgot the name of the card now, but the 5-cost spell that stuns all the units, all your opponent's units. I'll look it up.
You see it a lot these days in Expedition.
Yeah. Was that a consideration at all for you?
It was, yeah. I definitely considered it at one point, but I decided just running the 4 main hailstorms was good enough for board control.
We saw in the ECQ, there were a couple double damage
crystallized. There we go.
Crystallized. Thank you.
Yeah, that's it. But we saw a couple of double damage hailstorms that worked just as well as a harsh roll, because the opponents weren't running too many giant units. They were mostly around 6. So I think like double damage hailstorm is enough. Would you agree, John?
Absolutely, yeah. It's good on 3, and then sometimes it's good again on, if you just reread it and play it again for 3. It's like a game that's going a little rough when you have to prodigious back your hailstorm and give it double damage. But that usually does the trick. Like it's a last resort kind of thing, but sometimes that's what you need to do. And it's very accessible. Another reason why these Eclipse Dragons are so good is like prodigious sorcery is a fast spell for some reason. And so like
it's a lot easier to play it. Yeah.
if you get down to if you can burn them and have that 2 power on your turn and just the 1 dragon in play, like that's 5 power on the opponent's turn. So that gives you access to that sorcery if that's what you decide you need to do right then and there. Like,
I mean, it
you have
can
to do a
also
lot
cost
of
4
math with this
the
deck.
garden.
Yeah. Usually all these things are discounted by 1 or 2
Yeah, I
because your
usually
garden is in
see
play.
everything costing either like 1 or 2 or sorcery costing 4.
Garden makes this deck just completely ridiculous. Like if you can keep it in play,
Garden is a broken site. It always
it's really
was.
good.
Even after the nerf, it's still broken.
Yeah.
And then, do you want to add anything about your market design? Like, did it perform for you? Did it not?
Yeah, like parts of it. I think in my whole run, I grabbed Edict of Linray maybe 1 time, and I never needed an Ice Bolt. I don't think, because like the 1 time I maybe did, a handful of times I did need an Ice Bolt. There was already one in my void from one of my gardens. So I think, and like the Edict of Linray was there because I was expecting more big Praxis. I only played 1 of those on my in my first day run, and I ended up just royal decreeing. Like I think I royal decreed that opponent like 2 turns in a row because after the first one I saw what else they had in their hand, and I was like, let's do that again. So that's what the rereads are in the deck for there, because it's just such a flexible card, and yeah, like that just did the trick. And in that matchup, I literally didn't even need to grab the Edict of Linray. I did just grab it once or twice just to deal with a problematic time unit, but it wasn't really serving the purpose I initially had it in the market for. So going forward, or depending on the ladder meta and things like that, if you're trying this deck out, I think Edict of Linray and Ice Bolt are definitely flex slots here. Shopka overperformed, Permafrost overperformed, and Royal Decree. I mean, those were all just very good every time I grabbed them.
You had both of them in your market.
Correct.
I do think you should run only 1. Probably, I usually don't run more than 1. If
More
I
than
already
1 what?
have it, removal in my market.
Oh, I mean, it's almost all removal. Like, actually, literally every spell in my market is removal.
Kinda. I mean, Linray seems odd. I never liked that. But what would you replace it with?
So there was times where I wished I had a Backlash in my market. So that's a consideration.
Wait, Backlash, not Unseal?
Correct. Yeah, I'm not concerned about any curses in the current meta or what I expected or played against this weekend. Yeah, and the spell damage on Backlash makes it fetchable with Prodigious, and like in previous builds I had it main, and yeah, it's like I ended up going with just the 4x display for my counter magic, which is also fetchable by sorcery. But yeah, there was times where I wished Edict or Ice Bolt were Backlash. There's some other market consideration I was trying to think of. It's escaping me right now, but yeah, there was some other change that I was thinking about after the tournament ended this weekend. But this is not a deck that was built for ladder. I've literally not ever played it on ladder. I put this configuration together the night before. I played my day 1 games on Saturday, so I put this together like Friday afternoon, did some testing.
Would you try it in ladder?
Sure, I'd try it, but I'm not just saying like, hey, this is great, in Throne ladder. This was literally tuned for what I was expecting the meta to be for the tournament this weekend.
I'm wondering something. If I'd played against your deck with this one that I showcased, how long do you think that game would go on?
Hopefully I kill you before you get to, do any of your fancy stuff.
So the match history I linked to, you can
most games with this deck end on maybe turn, 6, 7, or 8 at the latest.
You might
if everything's going according to plan.
You might see 2
some even earlier.
Skycroak decks. Those were both Skycroak sorcery decks. Like the 13 turns. I was actually surprised that I was able to combat them with this version compared to the one that I used without fire in my ECQ games. This one, it was able to fetch any spell I need, including Waylay. It was able to counterspell stuff. I'm using the only reason why I use my Face Siege's power was basically Face Sieges, and I had one game where got me to 1 HP. And
Sure.
I had rejuvenation, so it was
Basically, none of those decks that you're facing on ladder had more than one counterspell. And then, I don't care about relics. I don't care about curses. I don't care about face ages. I got snowballs. I got gardens, and half of your cards are literally dead against my deck because they're all creature removal. So I think the matchup is very good. And I never face any decks like that in general. I certainly didn't expect to play in the ECQ.
One thing that I actually did when people started shooting me in the face with double damage spells was display for Stormhold Knife and then play face sieges. And after that, Merchant for Disjunction to return my dead knife to play it as more HP.
Mm-hmm.
That kind of bought me time. It was an interesting.
Yeah. I had one of my games yesterday when I was doing my initial 28. I had it was basically like the nut draw for this deck. Like I don't remember if it was turn 6 or 7, but I literally was able to do 40 damage to them. I think I had 2 Eclipse Dragons in play. So like it was just completely busted. It was just an absolute like perfect scenario or whatever. But yeah,
hey, it still
like
makes
the
you feel
dragons
nice.
are what. Like the normal version can't ramp up like that.
I like dragons a lot, but you said that usually they can be killed with a fast spell. So take note. Remember display of instinct that we
The
mentioned
timing of playing the dragons is very important.
Yeah,
Like, you don't just play them.
Power.
Yeah, or you save them until the opponent. Like if you know they're going to play a sight or something like that, which also usually depletes their power. Like you don't just always run them out on turn 5. Like typically the garden is the better turn 5 play, but I think about half the time where I had the choice, it was one or the other. It just really depended on what the opponent was doing or the matchup.
I like your version much better than like the generic. It seems more fun and flexible. And
it's generic now because a lot of those lists are out there, but I mean this is something that I like developed myself, and was keeping all my other versions to myself. Like, I haven't been playing these on ladder much and things like that, but all the other good players also figured out really good versions and all thought that a version was top tier and things like that for the tournament. And shared a lot of similarities.
It'd be interesting with some free time to go back and look at the top 64 and see what matchups the other Spellcrag decks lost to. You know what I mean?
Yeah, so in my first game today in top 64, I got absolutely destroyed. Like it was versus a very tuned Combre aggro deck. Wasn't like any of the ones I faced in day 1, and it was extremely powerful against my exact deck and strategy. And I think I played well and things like that, but it was almost an unwinnable matchup for me. So like,
oh wow,
definitely learned a little something there. As far as my goal here was to make day 2, and I feel like this deck easily got me there, but I didn't. Yeah, I didn't expect a ton of Combre aggro, and I definitely didn't tune it necessarily for that matchup or anything like that, right? So, it ended up, day 2, there was almost a 0% chance of me going forward from my first round today, but yeah, the opponent played it well. I played it well, but it was a really tough matchup.
Gotcha. All right, man. Sweet. Well, thank you guys both for sharing your decks with us. I think they're super fun. I've obviously already been playing JohnHolio's, and I'm going to try Deaths out because I like fun decks, and I think I'm in D3. I'm not D2. I might be in D2, I think, actually. I think, John, your deck took me to D2.
I'm just a lowly gold right now. Like I said, I haven't been playing these on ladder, right? I'm testing with my team and things like that.
Yeah.
By the way, since we're finishing up, I'm just going to share one screenshot of something that regards to my deck that you might want to share. It's a combo that's actually quite common. Like I usually pull this off, and it's I just posted it. It's basically the way to make last word not a 1/1, so it doesn't die to a random ping.
I'd also like to add something about my deck too.
Yeah. All right. So for those of you that are listening, real quick, Death had mentioned it earlier, but just to reiterate, it's Stronghold Visage. So you gain 1 life, 1 armor every turn, and then Mask of Torment, so you keep ramping up, and then with just the Visage building up armor, once you play the last word, all that armor will transfer over to it. So instead of it being a 1/1, it could be a 1/3, 1/5, 1/9, whatever armor you have left. And then that way it gives you a little bit of sticking power with the last word. John, what's your alibi?
We mentioned it on Death's deck, but the Shiftstone cost here, mine's only 22,000.
Oh wow,
so
there you go.
As far as it's a lot more approachable if you just want to try it out, but huge disclaimer, like this style of deck is very mentally taxing. And like it really helps a lot if you know like matchups and things like that. So it's definitely a difficult one to play, even though but it's easy to approach just because of the shifts.
There's actually no legendaries in your deck, and
just because the site is a promo, right? All the other sites are legendaries, and then so it's kind of a weird exception.
And then Eclipse Dragon, I think is a pretty safe craft. I think if you're ever playing Fire, I think you're gonna be happy playing Dragons. The Crest every deck as well. So the most like sketchy craft here, as far as the rares would go, would be the Prodigious Sorcery. That's the kind of most narrow one, but. Other than that, I think
that's such a fun card. I mean, you can crafting 4 of or whatever is maybe risky unless you definitely want to play like this style of deck. Exactly.
Is great.
Yeah, 1's a safe craft because you can just slap 1 in a different style Gen F deck and have it perform
When you
great.
mentioned that, I actually made an expedition deck, expedition version of the deck that I just talked about, and the win con is actually. I have Prodigious Sorcery in my market, and I use it to just grab Channel the Tempest and
there you go.
Display. And those two combined is lethal.
Nice.
So the one of is this easy safe craft, but
one of
additional only if you're looking to play some style deck where it's like prodigious combo of some sort.
But all right, guys, that's going to have to do it. We're bridging over to the overtime, which is fine. I'm okay with that. So we're going to cut short our spoiler or preview cards, and we're only going to discuss one. So we'll bring up the rest of them in the next show, John. So I'll bring up one of, ironically, Death's favorites. I think he was very excited about this.
Sounds good.
Yep. So we'll bring up Aramot's Designs, plural. This was actually brought the last card that was previewed in today's ECQ after the finals. And it is a slow spell at rare for 2 and a shadow. And it reads, kill each unit with cost 2 or less. So, Death, go ahead and take it away, brother.
So I think this card is amazing, and it might be even better than Hailstorm in specific circumstances. So Hailstorm might be better in, I don't know, if you can use Prodigious Sorcery on it, but this straight up kills stuff that Hailstorm can't. For example, the Lookout Elf, or whatever it's called. The one
Borderlands Lookout.
Yeah, I think that's it. That gets stats based on how many how many influences your opponent has. So basically, that card is a 4/5 against this deck that I showed, and I can kill it with Hailstorm. And there are like other 2-drops that I think I was unable to kill them either if they're immune to damage or something like that,
or if they're just buffed in some way.
Yeah, if they have weapons, for example, Rakano units that love like weapons that Hailstorm becomes useless against.
Or a Mastery Shenra or something like that.
Yeah, this just removes them, and it's much cheaper, and it's only 1 shadow, and it's 2 cost.
Yeah,
but this also will be amazing in Expedition. It's a cheap AoE removal, and in Expedition there's way more like 2-drops that are extremely prominent.
So
Barret. So kills Barret.
I have a couple of points on this card. I actually don't think it's ever going to be a staple or a 4 or 3 of. I think it's going to be closer to a 2 of in decks, and I'll tell you why. Excuse me. Of course, when I finally talk, I choke and die. That's great. So, actually, I have one question, though, about this. Will it break Aegis?
Probably.
Yeah, it should break.
It should break. Okay.
Aegis on it. It won't kill a unit with Aegis.
It'll
pop Aegis.
Okay.
Hit every unit, kind of like heal.
Yeah.
Okay, fair enough. So here's my thing, and the reason why I think it's good because, like you said, there's plenty of units that are 1 or 2 costs that are going to be bigger than what Hailstorm can take out. But I think the downside to this, the biggest downside to this card, and that's why I'm just going to throw it out there, is merchants. It does not hit merchants, and they are predominant in most of the decks. And I think
they're also not problem units usually.
I mean, I don't know about that. Like,
they're not most decks win cons.
So any of the
only merchant that's a problem to me is the Aegis merchant. The rest of them kind of die.
So if the board is a bunch of 1s and 2s and then one of those, this kills those and then pops the Aegis, so you can deal with it with something else.
No, I think it doesn't pop Aegis because
I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah, my bad. That's
it wouldn't target it because it's not 2 cost. So yeah, there's merit to what you're saying.
So don't get me wrong. I think the card is good. I don't think the card is bad. Just like how we saw Defiance get nerfed and it's still included in decks. Granted, it's not a 4 of anymore, but it's still included in decks. I think it's in on that boat, but there is something to consider that it doesn't, just because of that. It's something to make note of. Like I said, I'm not downplaying the card. I'm just playing both sides of the coin. And I think the fact that in Throne, 90, I mean, I can't remember the last time I saw a deck minus like Gato Sujo's monocolor deck and the occasional aggro deck, fire aggro deck that does not run a merchant. So one of the most predominant style of units in the format is not getting hit by this. So that's just something to think about.
Yeah, I think this is a much better like expedition card, but I also think that the aggro expedition meta has already kind of passed. So I don't know that it's like a 4 of immediate. Like if they just added only this card a couple months ago when Expedition was pretty new and everyone was going for the busted, like
it would kind of shut down Expedition.
It would have, but it's already been kind of with the addition of Defiance and things like that. So
I'll be honest, like in the deck that I mentioned, like the Expedition version of the deck I talked about, I'm running, I think, 4 Defiance, and be happy to swap some of those. I probably would like to run actually 3 of those cards of Ermot's designs, just because I still see aggro there. I still see a lot of Verits. I see those 2-cost dragons with like that busted mastery. Yeah,
that's the one I was about to mention. Like, when everyone was doing those and doing the Jack's knife and just Verits and everywhere, this would have been a lot better than.
Well,
I actually still see that.
I mean, okay, so once again, me playing both sides, like here's a good side to it. Like it's still a 2-cost card. So if you only hit 2 units with it, that's still card advantage.
I mean, even if you hit just 1, it's not card advantage, but it's that's a lot cheaper than most expedition removal spells, right?
Yeah. So I would agree. I wouldn't run 4 of them, but 2 or 3, I think I would run main deck. And if they're not useful, they can always be like moved by merchants to the market.
It would be nice if Prodigious Sorcery makes it hit 4 or less units. That'd
be interesting.
I do have one additional question that came to mind. And this is kind of a corner case, but I'm just curious because we don't know what else is in the set.
Right.
But Moment of Creation golems. Hold on. What was the other one that came to mind? Dragons off of Cradle and Griffins off of Kodos.
Those all have. Those are not like magic tokens. Those all have like regularly.
So they have the appropriate casting
cost.
Like
the dragons, I think, cost 5.
Okay.
The sentinels are like 7.
Dragon is actually 6, I think.
6, yeah. So tokens in this game don't really function at all.
Okay, that was just something that I drew a blank on. I mean, I know I've probably seen the cost on them, but I was like, I don't remember. Okay,
I got you, Jedi. I know the answer.
Appreciate it. So that was just something I was thinking. Maybe there was a corner case where that would do some work. Obviously, this Rex Grenadins and I guess a little bit of Yetis. Not really that much.
I don't think this is like a market though, right? Like
I think it's a main deck, but not 4, as you said.
I think you can always find a better option in this style for your market in either Expedition or Throne.
No,
but it's worth.
Malediction is better in the market.
Exactly.
I think I like what John said, where sometimes it's just gonna be a 1-for-1 and you're happy with it, and then sometimes it's a 3 or 4-for-1 and you're extremely happy with it.
Yeah.
And again,
I'm excited to try it out.
you have merchants, you can just market it away, right?
Yeah, very. That's you took the words right out of my mouth, Death. That's exactly what I was thinking. Where you can have it as a 3 of, and then if you draw it and they have no targets, cool, you got market fodder.
Like just like when they added Defiance into the format, I had tried it, immediately or whatever, and I already noticed like that aggro was not as prevalent, like almost immediately. Like people are just like, you know what, I'm gonna try different strategies. So like that was already down to a 2 of in any deck I was trying it out in, right?
I'm using it still as a 4 of in a deck that I previously mentioned, and actually it's performing quite well because of the style of the deck. So I think it's because of that.
All right, guys. I think that's good enough to put a bow on it. Any last words on Aramot's design? I think we kind of took it.
Cool, very cool art too.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Super impressive.
A lot.
I like it.
I like anything related to Aramot. I had him as my background.
Yeah, it's kind of cool because now I kind of feel like Aramot's going to be the big bad guy for a little bit, which is kind of neat.
Especially when called designs. That means he's got something going on.
He's a Bruin.
Tricky stuff.
Yeah.
This is cool.
Hey, we got something in common at least. Brewing some evil.
Yeah, true story. All right, guys. So that's going to do it for us. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Death, thank you so much for sharing your deck, your insight, and your knowledge with us today on the show coming on. I really appreciate having you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was really fun.
John, as always, absolute pleasure having you on the show. Congratulations yet again for a top 64 finish with your own brew. Very proud of you, friend.
Yeah. Thanks, Jedi. Yeah. So yeah, that was my first, top 64. So excited about that. Thanks again. If you guys are trying to find me or talk to me about any of this or more, you can find me on Jedi's Discord, Farming Eternal Discord, or occasionally on twitch.tv/JohnHolio.
Yeah,
if you want some really, really stupid brews that work for some odd reason, you can also contact me in the same Discord.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. Well, that's going to do it for this week. Thank you so much again for joining us for episode 45 of the EternalJourney podcast, where we talked about Control, the ECQ, and some exciting spoilers. Tune in next week for hopefully 1, happy holidays, depending on when we're recording it, 2, big episode on redrawing, and then finally some more spoilers for the upcoming campaign. But that's going to do it. I am Jedi. You can catch me, of course, on twitch.tv/Jedi_EJ. And of course, you can catch both my offline content on YouTube now that you could just search EternalJourney, and of course EJthePodcast on Twitter, where you get updates on whenever new episodes go live, as well as when I'm streaming and things like that. And then of course the Discord, so you can get a hold of myself, Death, and JohnHolio 24/7, or at least at a timely fashion, on the Discord, the link below. But that's going to do it, guys. Thank you once again so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Thank you all for sharing, for liking, for subscribing, for upticking, for subscribing the other places, and all the other giving us ratings and all that good stuff. You guys are fantastic. And that's going to do it. So until next time, as always, happy gaming.
Bye, everybody.
See you.